The Great Hall of the Galactic Confederation stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floor. Representatives from 17 different species sat in their designated sections, each area designed to accommodate their unique physiologies. The Zephyrians floated in their gas-filled chambers, their translucent bodies shimmering with bioluminescent patterns. The massive Corvani delegates rested on reinforced platforms, their rocky exteriors gleaming under the artificial suns. The insectoid, Thektar, buzzed quietly among themselves, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights like scattered jewels. At the center of this magnificent assembly sat the High Council, beings so ancient that some had witnessed the formation of the Confederation itself. They had guided civilization across the galaxy for over 10,000 years, overseeing trade routes that spanned millions of light years and maintaining peace between species that had once waged wars across entire star systems. Today, they were meeting with humanity. The human delegation looked almost comical in comparison. 5 beings barely 2 meters tall, their pale skin lacking any natural armor or defensive features. They wore simple cloth garments instead of the elaborate ceremonial dress favored by other species. No biological weapons, no natural flight capabilities, no telepathic abilities. They breathed the same oxygen-nitrogen mixture as several other species, but their lifespans were laughably short. Most would be dead within a single century. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood at the designated speaking platform, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustic systems. She had spent 3 years learning the proper protocols for addressing the High Council. 3 years of studying the complex social hierarchies, the ancient traditions, the careful diplomatic language that governed all interactions within Confederation space. "Honored Council," she began, her words automatically translated into the 17 languages spoken by the assembled delegates. "Humanity requests consideration for expanded trade privileges within the coreward sectors." A low harmonic emanated from the Melodian representative, a sound that roughly translated to polite skepticism. The Thektar delegates' wings buzzed in what their species considered mild amusement. Even the normally stoic Corvani shifted slightly on their platforms, causing small tremors in the chamber floor. High Counselor Veltar raised one of his 4 arms, and the chamber fell silent. The ancient being had overseen first contact with humanity 57 years ago, when their primitive chemical rockets had barely managed to reach their own moon. In Veltar's personal timeline, that was practically yesterday. "Ambassador Chen," his voice resonated through specialized speakers that converted his species' natural subsonic communication into audible frequencies. "The Confederation appreciates humanity's enthusiasm for participation in galactic commerce. However, the coreward sectors contain technologies and materials that require significant safety protocols. Your species has demonstrated remarkable progress, but perhaps a more gradual integration would be appropriate." Sarah had expected this response. The same careful, diplomatic rejection that humanity had received for every significant request over the past 5 decades. Access to advanced medical technologies? Perhaps when your biological sciences mature. Permission to establish colonies beyond the rim territories? Best to develop interstellar experience gradually. Opportunities to contribute to Confederation research projects? Your theoretical foundations need more development. "We understand the Council's concerns," Sarah replied, maintaining the formal tone required by protocol. "However, humanity has successfully managed the technologies already shared with us. Our safety record in the rim sectors has been exemplary. We believe we're ready for expanded responsibilities." The response came not from the High Council, but from Dr. Kethmos, the Confederation's leading xenobiologist. The elderly Zephyrian floated forward in his chamber, his body pulsing with the deep blues and purples that indicated careful consideration. "Ambassador, your species exhibits fascinating adaptive capabilities," Dr. Kethmos began, his translated voice carrying the slight mechanical undertone common to all Zephyrian communications. However, our studies indicate significant limitations that must be considered. Your maximum lifespan restricts the accumulation of necessary experience. Your psychological profiles show concerning tendencies toward risk-taking behavior. Most significantly, your species demonstrates an alarming inclination to modify and improve upon established technologies rather than using them as designed. This last point caused a stir among several delegations. The concept of deliberately altering proven technologies was considered not just dangerous, but fundamentally disrespectful to the species that had developed them. Why would anyone change something that already worked perfectly well? Sarah felt her jaw tighten slightly, but her expression remained neutral. Dr. Kethmos, with respect, many of our technological adaptations have improved efficiency and safety, parameters beyond original specifications. Precisely the problem, Dr. Kethmos replied, his body now shifting to the orange and red patterns that indicated concern. Such modifications introduce variables that cannot be properly tested across the timeframes necessary for galactic-scale implementation. What your species considers improvement might prove catastrophic over longer periods. The Melodian representative added their harmonic voice to the discussion. The young species often believes it can improve upon the wisdom of ages. Time teaches humility. Ambassador Chen looked around the chamber, seeing the same expression reflected in 17 different physiologies. Patient condescension. These beings had been traveling between stars when humanity was still discovering fire. They had built civilizations spanning multiple galaxies while humans were developing agriculture. From their perspective, humanity's 50 years of space travel was barely a first step into a much larger universe. We acknowledge the vast experience represented in this chamber, Sarah said carefully. However, we believe diversity of thought and approach strengthens any endeavor. Human perspectives might offer valuable contributions to Confederation projects. High Counselor Veltar's secondary arms moved in a gesture that roughly translated to gentle disagreement. Ambassador, the Confederation has thrived for millennia precisely because we follow established protocols and proven methodologies. Innovation, while interesting, must be balanced against stability and safety. Perhaps in a few thousand years, when humanity has developed appropriate wisdom and restraint, such contributions might be considered. A few thousand years. Sarah had heard variations of this timeline throughout her diplomatic career. Always some distant future when humanity might be ready, might be mature enough, might have earned the right to participate as equals rather than supervised children. The formal session continued for several more hours, following the ancient patterns of diplomatic discourse. Each human request was politely acknowledged, carefully considered, and diplomatically declined. Access to advanced energy technologies. Humanity lacked the theoretical foundations. Permission to establish research stations. In the inner sectors, their experimental methodologies needed refinement. Opportunities for joint exploration missions. Best to develop more experience in their current territories first. Finally, as the chamber's artificial suns began to dim in simulation of evening cycles, High Counselor Veltar brought the session to a close. The Confederation values humanity's enthusiasm and recognizes your species' potential, he announced formally. However, wisdom suggests a gradual approach to integration. We encourage continued development within your current territories. Perhaps, in future generations, when experience has tempered enthusiasm, we might revisit these discussions. The dismissal was polite, respectful, and absolutely final. That evening, in the privacy of their diplomatic quarters, the human delegation gathered for their final meeting on the Confederation capital world. The room was appointed with furniture scaled for human physiology, a gesture of hospitality that somehow felt more condescending than welcoming. Same as always, muttered Dr. James Rodriguez, humanity's chief scientific advisor. We're too young, too reckless, too eager to change things that work perfectly well already. They're not entirely wrong, admitted Captain Lisa Jang, their military representative. We do have a tendency to tinker with things. Remember what happened when we improved those Thektar mining lasers? We increased their efficiency by 30%, Rodriguez protested, and accidentally created a resonance frequency that made the Thektar physically ill, Zhang countered. Took us 6 months to figure out why our mining crews kept getting sick. Ambassador Chen stood at the large viewing window looking out at the city below. Millions of beings from dozens of species moved through transportation networks that had remained unchanged for centuries. Everything worked perfectly, efficiently, safely. Nothing ever needed to be improved because everything had already been perfected long ago. They'll never see us as equals, she said quietly. We could follow their protocols for 1,000 years, and we'd still be the young species that needs supervision. So what do we do? Asked Dr. Rodriguez. Sarah turned from the window, her decision crystallizing. We stop asking for permission. 53 years had passed since humanity's quiet departure from Confederation space. In the grand timeline of galactic politics, this was barely a moment. The Zephyrians were still debating trade regulations that had been proposed a century ago. The Corvani were conducting geological surveys that wouldn't be completed for another 200 years. The Confederation operated on scales where individual lifetimes were insignificant, and the memory of one minor species choosing isolation was already fading into the archives. Commander, Zekthul of the Confederation Survey Corps was conducting a routine patrol along the outer rim when the first anomaly was detected. His ship, the Eternal Vigilance, was a Corvani-designed vessel built for long-duration exploration missions. Its sensors were among the most sophisticated in the galaxy, capable of detecting gravitational fluctuations across multiple light-years and mapping stellar formations with extraordinary precision. Commander, reported sensor technician Yil Andra, her Zephyrian form pulsing with the yellow patterns that indicated confusion. I'm reading gravitational anomalies in Sector 7749. The readings don't match any known phenomena. Zekthul, a veteran, Melodian officer whose harmonic voice had guided dozens of exploration missions, modulated to the frequency of mild interest. Define anomalous, technician. Sir, the gravitational field suggests a massive object, roughly the size of a small moon. But visual and electromagnetic scans show empty space. According to our instruments, there's something there that isn't there. The Thektar navigator, Clickstar, buzzed his wings in the pattern that indicated technical skepticism. Sensor malfunction. These old Corvani systems sometimes generate false positives in regions with unusual stellar wind patterns. But when they reached the coordinates, 3 different sensor arrays confirmed the same impossible readings. A gravitational signature indicating a massive artificial structure, but absolutely nothing visible in the electromagnetic spectrum. No heat signatures, no reflected light, no radio emissions, just empty space that somehow wasn't empty. Could be a cloaked station, suggested Yelandra, though her bioluminescent patterns showed uncertainty. Some species develop stealth technologies. No known cloaking system can mask gravitational effects, Zekthul replied, his harmonic frequencies shifting to indicate growing concern. Gravity cannot be hidden or redirected by any technology in our databases. The investigation team spent 3 days at the coordinates, running every scan protocol in their extensive libraries. The results were consistent and impossible. Something massive was definitely there, but it existed in a way that none of their instruments could properly detect or analyze. The report filed by the Eternal Vigilance was the first of many. Over the following months, similar anomalies were detected throughout the Outer Rim territories. The pattern was always the same: gravitational signatures indicating large artificial structures, but no other detectable evidence of their existence. Dr. Kethmos, now even more ancient than during humanity's departure, reviewed the accumulating reports in his laboratory on the Confederation capital world. His assistants, junior researchers from various species, floated or stood or perched around the central display, showing the distribution of anomalous readings. "The pattern suggests systematic construction," observed his primary assistant, a young Corvani named Torgul, whose rocky exterior was still smooth with youth. "The gravitational signatures are spaced at regular intervals, following optimal orbital mechanics for some unknown purpose." "But construction of what?" asked Dr. Velshara, a Thektar xenotechnologist whose compound eyes could perceive electromagnetic spectra invisible to most other species. "Our deepest scans reveal nothing. No materials, no energy signatures, no waste heat from industrial processes. How does one build invisible structures?" Dr. Kethmos's elderly form shifted to the deep purple patterns that indicated profound contemplation. He had spent centuries studying the technologies of various species, documenting their development, patterns, and capabilities. The anomalies represented something entirely outside his accumulated knowledge. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "we're detecting the side effects of some unknown natural phenomenon. Gravitational lensing from hidden dark matter concentrations, or the influence of extra-dimensional objects intersecting our reality." The team of researchers nodded agreement. This explanation fit their understanding of the universe far better than the alternative, that some unknown species had developed technology so advanced that it could manipulate gravity while remaining, completely undetectable by every other means. But the anomalies continued to multiply. Captain Lorthek was commanding a trade convoy through the neutral zones when his communications officer reported something unusual. The Melodian captain had been running cargo routes for over a century, and very little surprised him anymore. "Sir," announced communications specialist Bryn Tal, a Zephyrian whose expertise in electromagnetic phenomena made her invaluable for long-range exploration. "I'm detecting brief radio transmissions from the abandoned sectors." The abandoned sectors were what Confederation cartographers called the region where humanity had once maintained their small colonies. No one had bothered to update the designation after their departure. The area was considered uninhabited and largely irrelevant to major trade routes. "Define brief," Captain Lorthek requested, his harmonic frequencies indicating casual interest. "Microsecond bursts, highly compressed data streams. The encoding is unusual. It matches some of the linguistic patterns from the old human archives, but the complexity suggests technological capabilities far beyond what they possessed when they left." This got the captain's attention. His harmonic frequencies shifted to the range indicating surprise and concern. "Are you certain about the technological assessment?" Brintal's form pulsed with the confident blues and greens of professional certainty. "Sir, these transmissions are using quantum entanglement protocols for instantaneous communication across interstellar distances. The Confederation considers such technology theoretical at best. Our most advanced research teams haven't been able to achieve stable quantum entanglement beyond planetary distances." The convoy altered course to investigate, following the transmission sources deeper into the abandoned sectors. But by the time they reached the coordinates, the signals had ceased. Their sensors detected nothing but the background radiation of empty space and the faint gravitational echoes of long-dead stars. However, their improved sensor arrays did detect something else, more gravitational anomalies, larger and more complex than those reported by the survey teams. The invisible structures appeared to be connected in vast networks spanning multiple star systems, following patterns that suggested some enormous construction project. "Could the humans have developed this technology?" asked Navigator Plexmoth, a Thektar whose mathematical abilities were essential for complex astrogation calculations. Captain Lorthek considered the question. He had been involved in the final trade agreements with humanity before their departure. They had been a primitive species, barely capable of interstellar travel, with technology centuries behind Confederation standards. "Impossible," he concluded. Humans had barely mastered fusion power when they left. Their fastest ships required months to travel between star systems. They possessed no advanced materials science, no quantum manipulation capabilities, no gravitational engineering knowledge. A species doesn't advance from chemical rockets to quantum entanglement protocols in 50 years. But the evidence was difficult to explain otherwise. The transmissions were definitely using human linguistic patterns, even if the technological sophistication was beyond anything in Confederation databases, and the timing of the gravitational anomalies coincided suspiciously with humanity's presence in the region. The Confederation Science Council convened an emergency session to review the accumulated data. Representatives from all major research institutions gathered in the same crystal chamber where humanity had once requested expanded privileges. The irony was lost on most of the attendees. Dr. Kethmos presented the findings to his peers, his ancient form moving slowly through the visual displays that showed the distribution of anomalous readings. The data was comprehensive and deeply troubling. "We're dealing with technology that appears to violate several fundamental principles," he explained, his words translated into the 17 languages of the assembled scientists. The gravitational manipulations suggest mass energy conversions beyond our theoretical frameworks. The communication protocols indicate quantum manipulation capabilities that our best models consider impossible. And the scale of the construction projects implies industrial capacity orders of magnitude beyond anything in our experience. Dr. Yel Naran, the Confederation's leading theoretical physicist, raised a tentative objection. The elderly melodians' harmonic frequencies carried undertones of professional skepticism. Could we be misinterpreting the data? Perhaps multiple unknown factors are creating false positives in our sensor arrays. That was my first assumption, Dr. Kethmos replied. However, the patterns are too consistent and widespread. We've detected similar. The emergency beacon from the Astral Harmony reached Confederation Central Command at exactly 1427 Galactic Standard Time. The Deep Space Explorer had been conducting a routine survey mission in what the charts still designated as the Void Sector, the region where humanity had once maintained their small colonial presence. Now it was drifting powerless, its fusion reactors offline and its crew slowly dying as life support systems failed one by one. Captain Morthek had commanded exploration vessels for over 2 centuries, but he had never experienced a cascade failure quite like this. The ship's primary power coupling had developed a quantum resonance that destabilized the entire energy distribution network. Within hours, every major system had begun shutting down in sequence. Emergency power would last, perhaps, another day before the Astral Harmony became a tomb drifting through empty space. "Distress signal has been broadcasting for 18 hours, reported Communications Officer Lion Thara, her Zephyrian form pulsing with the dim blues that indicated failing health. Like the rest of the crew, she was already showing signs of oxygen deprivation as the recycling systems struggled with reduced power. No response from any Confederation vessels. Nearest patrol ship is still 47 hours away. The Thektar engineer, Click Vera, buzzed weakly from her position near the failing power cores. 47 hours is optimistic. Life support will fail completely within 26 hours. The quantum resonance is accelerating. Captain Morthek nodded grimly. He had already accepted their fate with the stoic resignation common to his Corvani species. The Astral Harmony and her crew would become another entry in the long list of vessels lost to the hazards of deep space exploration. It was an honorable end, if not a particularly comfortable one. That was when the impossible happened. "Sir," Lion Thera's voice carried a new note of confusion. "I'm detecting an approaching vessel, but the sensor readings don't make sense." "Explain," Morthek commanded, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "It's appearing, sir. Not approaching through normal space, but materializing out of nothing. The gravitational distortion suggests space itself is being folded somehow. The main viewer activated, drawing precious power from their failing reserves." What appeared on the screen made the entire bridge crew fall silent. The approaching vessel was clearly of human design, bearing the geometric patterns and modular construction philosophy that had once amused Confederation engineers. But this ship was enormous, easily 10 times the size of the largest human vessels on record. Its hull appeared to be made from some kind of adaptive material that shifted and flowed like liquid metal while maintaining perfect structural integrity. Unknown. "Vessel, this is Captain Morthek of the Confederation ship Astral Harmony," he transmitted on standard emergency frequencies. "We are experiencing critical systems failure and require immediate assistance." The response came immediately, but not through their communication systems. Instead, a voice spoke directly inside the bridge, as if the air itself had become a speaker. "Captain Morthek, this is Commander Sarah Chen of the Earth vessel Unbounded Curiosity. We're here to help." The name meant nothing to most of the crew, but Captain Morthek had studied historical records extensively. Sarah Chen had been humanity's last ambassador to the Confederation, the one who had delivered their final statement before withdrawing from galactic society. That had been over 50 years ago. If this was the same person, she should be dead by now, given humanity's brief lifespans. The rescue operation that followed defied every principle of engineering and physics that the Confederation had developed over thousands of years. The human ship didn't dock with the Astral Harmony in any conventional sense. Instead, sections of its hull seemed to reach out and embrace the failing explorer, creating a seamless connection that bypassed all normal atmospheric and pressure differentials. Human crew members appeared on the bridge without using transporters or shuttlecraft. They simply walked through what had been solid bulkheads moments before, their path opening and closing behind them like water. Their equipment was equally impossible: handheld devices that repaired quantum-level damage with casual ease, portable power sources that seemed to violate conservation of energy, medical scanners that diagnosed and treated conditions faster than the symptoms could be identified. The woman who introduced herself as Commander Chen looked exactly as Captain Morthek remembered from the historical records, despite the decades that had passed. Her hair was still dark, her skin unlined, her movements carrying the vitality of someone in their prime. But her eyes held depths that suggested experiences far beyond what any single human lifetime should contain. "Your power coupling developed a quantum resonance cascade," she explained casually, while her team worked with efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. "Common problem with Mark 7 Corvani reactors when they're operated in regions with high gravitational variance. We've seen it before." Engineer Clickavera buzzed weakly in protest. "Impossible. The Mark 7 design has been used successfully for over 3,000 years. No species has ever reported quantum resonance problems." Commander Chen smiled with what might have been gentle amusement. "That's because most species don't operate their ships in areas where space-time has been extensively modified. The gravitational fluctuations in this region tend to destabilize standard fusion containment fields." "Modified by whom?" Captain Morthek asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "By us," Chen replied simply. "This entire region has been restructured to accommodate our research facilities. We should have posted warnings, but we weren't expecting Confederation traffic in this area." Research facilities. Captain Morthek tried to process this information. The humans were conducting research that required modifying space-time itself across multiple star systems. The technological implications were staggering. Within 3 hours, the Astral Harmony was fully operational again. Not just repaired, but improved. The human team had eliminated several design inefficiencies that Corvani engineers had never noticed, upgraded the sensor arrays with technology that provided unprecedented resolution, and installed quantum stabilizers that would prevent similar cascades in the future. "We can't accept such generous assistance without offering compensation," Captain Morthek protested, following diplomatic protocols that had governed interspecies relations for millennia. No compensation necessary, Commander Chen replied. Consider it a professional courtesy between explorers. As the human team prepared to depart, Captain Morthek found himself compelled to ask the question that had been troubling him since their arrival. Commander, how is it that you appear unchanged after 50 years? Human lifespans were, Chen corrected gently. Human lifespans were limited. We've made certain adjustments. She gestured toward her ship, and for a moment, the astral Harmony's enhanced sensors provided readings that made no sense. The human vessel existed in multiple dimensional states simultaneously, its structure extending into spatial dimensions that the Confederation's mathematics couldn't properly describe. We've learned to think beyond the limitations that once constrained us, Chen continued. Time, space, energy, matter. These are more flexible than most species realize. Once you understand the underlying principles, many things become possible. Before departing, Commander Chen left the Confederation crew with coordinates and a simple message. If your people are interested in seeing what we've been working on, these coordinates lead to one of our museums. Consider it a graduation present. The human ship disappeared as suddenly as it had arrived, folding space around itself until nothing remained but the background radiation of empty space. But the astral harmony now carried sensor data that would change everything the Confederation thought they knew about technology, physics, and the nature of reality itself. Captain Morthek made the decision to investigate the coordinates immediately, despite standing orders to return to base after any emergency situation. The museum, if that's what it truly was, lay deeper in the void sector, in a region that Confederation charts marked as containing nothing but dead stars and cosmic debris. They found it orbiting a brown dwarf star that shouldn't have been stable, enough to maintain any kind of permanent installation. The structure itself defied easy description. It appeared to be constructed from crystallized space-time, its walls transparent but somehow solid, its interior dimensions clearly larger than its exterior volume. Gravitational fields that should have torn the building apart instead flowed around it like water around a stone. The museum's contents were even more extraordinary. Displayed in perfect preservation were examples of technology from every major Confederation species, dating back thousands of years. Corvani mining equipment that had been obsolete for centuries, Zephyrian atmospheric processors that represented the pinnacle of environmental engineering, Thektar navigation computers that had guided the first intergalactic expeditions. But these weren't just museum pieces. Each display included detailed technical analyses that revealed flaws and limitations that their original designers had never noticed. Improvements that could have been made with different materials or alternative approaches. Theoretical. The emergency session of the Confederation Grand Assembly had been in continuous session for 6 days. The Great Crystal Chamber, designed to accommodate thousands of representatives from 17 species, buzzed with an energy that hadn't been felt since the Andromedan crisis 2 millennia ago. But this time, the threat wasn't some external force or natural disaster. The threat was the growing realization that everything the Confederation thought they knew about galactic civilization might be fundamentally wrong. High Counselor Veltar, now ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species, floated at the center of the assembly. His 4 arms moved in slow, deliberate patterns as he reviewed the accumulated evidence for the 100th time. The reports from the Astral Harmony had been confirmed by 3 additional investigation teams. The museum was real. The technology was genuine, and the implications were staggering. The analysis teams have completed their preliminary assessments, Veltar announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. The artifacts recovered from the human facility represent technological advancement beyond our current capabilities by factors ranging from hundreds to thousands of years. A low harmonic rumble emanated from the Melodian delegation, expressing collective disbelief. Dr. Yel Naran, now the senior scientific advisor to the Assembly, modulated his voice to frequencies of professional concern. Counselor, such advancement rates are unprecedented in galactic history. No species has ever achieved such rapid technological development. The mathematical models suggest it should be impossible. Dr. Kethmos, despite his advanced age, had insisted on personally analyzing the recovered human technologies. His Zephyrian form pulsed with the deep purples and reds that indicated profound disturbance. The mathematical models are based on conventional development patterns, he reported, his translated voice carrying undertones of bewilderment. Species typically advance through predictable stages, building upon established foundations over thousands of years. But humans appear to have bypassed entire developmental phases. The Thektar representative, Prime Calculator Jekthil, buzzed her wings in the pattern that indicated complex mathematical processing. The quantum manipulation technologies alone should have required centuries of theoretical development. Yet, humans seem to have mastered them as foundational principles. Captain Morthek had been summoned to provide first-hand testimony about his encounter with Commander Chen and the human rescue operation. The Corvani officer's rocky exterior remained impassive, but his words carried the weight of absolute certainty. The human vessel demonstrated capabilities that our finest theoretical physicists consider impossible, he reported. Spatial folding, dimensional manipulation, direct matter-energy conversion. They treated these technologies as routine tools, no more remarkable than we might consider a standard communications array. And Commander Chen herself? Pressed Veltar. You're certain it was the same individual who served as humanity's ambassador 50 years ago? Physically identical in every measurable way, Morthek confirmed. But there was something different about her presence, and depth of experience that suggested far more time had passed for her than for us. This observation sparked intense discussion among the assembled scientists. Several species had theoretical frameworks for temporal manipulation, but none had ever achieved practical application. The idea that humans might have developed time dilation technologies added another layer of impossibility to an already incredible situation. Dr. Velshara, the Confederation's leading expert on xenopsychology, raised a question that had been troubling many of the delegates. If humans have achieved such technological superiority, why haven't they made formal contact? Advanced civilizations typically seek to share knowledge and establish beneficial relationships with other species. The answer came from an unexpected source. Commander Lorthek, the trade convoy captain who had first detected human quantum transmissions, requested permission to address the assembly. With respect to the distinguished delegates, he said, his melodian harmonics carrying notes of uncomfortable realization, perhaps they no longer consider us relevant. The chamber fell silent at this suggestion. For thousands of years, the Confederation had operated under the assumption that they represented the pinnacle of galactic civilization. Member species might have different specialties, but together, they had accumulated the greatest collection of knowledge and capability in the known universe. The idea that some other civilization might view them as irrelevant was almost incomprehensible. "Explain your reasoning, Commander," Veltar requested, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "During my years of trade negotiations with humanity, I observed their approach to problem-solving," Lorthek continued. "When they encountered obstacles, they didn't seek to work around them or find alternatives. They analyzed the fundamental principles underlying the obstacles and developed ways to eliminate them entirely." He gestured toward the displays showing human technological artifacts. "We told them they were too primitive for advanced energy technologies, so they developed energy sources that make our fusion reactors look like campfires. We told them they lacked the theoretical foundations for space-time manipulation, so they learned to treat space and time as engineering materials. We told them they were too young and reckless, so they found ways to extend their lifespans and accumulate experience." The implications of this analysis sent uncomfortable vibrations through the assembled delegates. Humanity hadn't just overcome, The limitations that the Confederation had identified, they had made those limitations irrelevant. Dr. Kethmos added his own disturbing observations. The quantum signatures we've detected suggest that humans are operating across multiple temporal frames simultaneously. Their research facilities may have experienced centuries or millennia of subjective time, while only decades have passed in our reference frame. Time dilation fields, asked prime calculator Jekthil, her compound eyes reflecting the chamber's lights in complex patterns. More than that, Dr. Kethmos replied. The energy signatures suggest they've created pocket dimensions where physical laws can be modified to accelerate research and development. They may have had thousands of years to work on problems that we're still considering theoretical challenges. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembly. If humans had developed controlled temporal acceleration, they could have compressed millennia of research into decades of real time. It would explain their impossible advancement rates and technological capabilities. But the most disturbing analysis came from the Confederation's military advisors. General Thokmar, a Corvani officer whose strategic expertise had guided the Confederation through several crisis periods, presented findings that made the entire assembly uncomfortable. The gravitational anomalies we've detected suggest construction projects on a scale that dwarfs our largest installations, he reported. The energy requirements alone would exceed the total output of our core systems, but more concerning is the strategic positioning. He activated a holographic display showing the distribution of detected anomalies across the galaxy. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. The human installations were positioned to monitor or control every major trade route, communication relay, and strategic resource in Confederation space. If these facilities are indeed human installations, General Thokmar continued, they represent a surveillance and potential interdiction network that encompasses our entire civilization. They could monitor our communications, track our fleet, movements, and potentially disrupt our infrastructure without our knowledge. The military implications were staggering. Not only had humanity developed technological capabilities far beyond Confederation standards, but they had deployed them in a configuration that gave them complete strategic dominance over the galaxy, and they had done it all while remaining essentially invisible to Confederation sensors. "Are we under threat?" asked Representative Morgethel of the Outer Colonies, his Zephyrian form pulsing with the rapid patterns that indicated fear. General Thokmar's rocky exterior remained impassive, but his words carried the weight of professional assessment. "Unknown. Their capabilities suggest they could neutralize our military forces without significant effort, but they've shown no hostile intentions. The rescue of the Astral Harmony demonstrates a willingness to provide assistance when requested." "But they didn't ask for permission," interjected Dr. Velshara. "They simply placed their installations wherever they chose, regardless of territorial boundaries or sovereign claims." This observation highlighted another unsettling aspect of the situation. The Confederation had spent thousands of years developing complex treaties and agreements governing territorial rights, resource allocation, and technological sharing. But humans appeared to be operating entirely outside this framework, treating galactic space as open territory for their research projects. High Counselor Veltar called for a recess while the Assembly's leadership met in emergency session. The private discussions were heated and filled with implications that none of the delegates wanted to voice publicly. The Confederation's attempts at establishing formal contact began 6 months after the Assembly's emergency sessions concluded. Ambassador Krelthane, chosen for his expertise in first contact protocols and his reputation for diplomatic flexibility, led a delegation of the Confederation's finest representatives toward the coordinates that Commander Chen had provided. The mission represented the most careful diplomatic preparation in Confederation history. Linguists had analyzed every recorded human communication for subtle meaning patterns. Xenopsychologists had developed interaction protocols based on humanity's observed behaviors. Cultural specialists had prepared gifts and presentations designed to demonstrate respect and peaceful intentions. What they found waiting for them was a simple relay station orbiting a neutron star that shouldn't have been stable enough to support any kind of permanent installation. The station itself was elegant in its simplicity, a crystalline structure that seemed to bend space around itself, creating a pocket of normal gravity and atmosphere in defiance of the neutron star's crushing gravitational field. No welcoming committee met the Confederation delegation. Instead, they found an automated message system that activated as soon as their ship approached. The holographic projection that appeared was immediately recognizable as Commander Sarah Chen, though she appeared to have aged considerably since Captain Morthek's encounter with her. Her appearance was striking in ways that made the assembled delegates uncomfortable. She looked older, certainly, but there was something timeless about her features, as if she had experienced far more than any single lifetime should contain. Her eyes held depths that suggested she had seen things that existed beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. "Greetings to our former colleagues in the Galactic Confederation," the recorded message began, her voice carrying notes of warmth mixed with something that might have been gentle sadness. "I am Sarah Chen, speaking on behalf of the human collective. If you're receiving this message, it means you've decided to investigate our recent activities." Ambassador Krelthane, a melodian whose harmonic communication abilities made him ideal for complex negotiations, immediately began composing formal responses according to established diplomatic protocols. But something in Chen's tone suggested that such protocols might no longer be relevant. "First, let me address the questions you're undoubtedly asking," the hologram continued. "Yes, we are the same species you knew 50 years ago. Yes, we have developed capabilities that probably seem impossible by your current understanding of physics and engineering. And yes, we have been observing your activities throughout Confederation space." The casual admission of surveillance sent uncomfortable vibrations through the delegation. But Chen's next words were even more unsettling. "You're wondering what we want, what our intentions are, whether we pose a threat to your civilization." She paused, and for a moment something like sadness crossed her features. "The truth is, we've moved beyond such concerns. The galaxy you know, the physics you understand, the limitations you accept, these are increasingly irrelevant to our current existence." The hologram gestured, and the space around the delegation's ship filled with images that defied easy comprehension, vast structures that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, energy patterns that seemed to violate conservation laws, scenes of human researchers working with technologies that treated space, time, and matter as malleable raw materials. "We exist across multiple temporal streams now," Chen explained, as if discussing routine engineering procedures. "Our research facilities operate in accelerated timeframes where centuries of work can be completed in minutes of your subjective experience. We've developed manufacturing systems that create matter from quantum fluctuations. We've learned to step outside this universe entirely to conduct experiments that require modification of fundamental physical constants." Ambassador Krelthane tried to process these claims, but they exceeded every framework for understanding that the Confederation had developed. The technologies Chen described weren't just advanced. They suggested that humans had moved beyond the need to work within the laws of physics as other species understood them. "But perhaps most importantly," the hologram continued, "we've solved the problem that drove us to leave Confederation space in the first place. We no longer need anyone's permission to explore, to experiment, to grow. We've become truly free." The pause. Message paused, allowing time for the implications to sink in. Then Chen's expression shifted to something that looked like genuine regret. "I want you to understand something about our departure 50 years ago. It wasn't anger or disappointment that drove us away. It was recognition. We realized that the Confederation's approach to advancement, careful, conservative, based on consensus and proven methodologies, was fundamentally incompatible with how we needed to develop." She gestured again, and new images appeared. Scenes of human colonies in the early days of their Confederation membership, showing researchers struggling with technologies they couldn't modify or improve, explorers confined to designated territories, inventors forced to work within established frameworks. "You taught us an important lesson," Chen said, her voice carrying notes of what might have been gratitude. "You showed us that seeking approval and working within established systems would forever limit us to the pace of the most conservative members. So we stopped seeking approval." The implications of this statement were staggering. Humanity hadn't just overcome the Confederation's limitations. They had transcended the entire concept of limitations as other species understood them. "Which brings us to why we're leaving," Chen announced, her words causing immediate alarm among the delegation. "Leaving?" Ambassador Krelthane transmitted immediately, abandoning diplomatic protocol in his urgency. "Where are you going?" The hologram seemed to look directly at him, though he knew it was just a recording. "This universe has become too small for us, Ambassador. We've explored every dimension accessible from this reality, cataloged every possible variation of physical law, exhausted every research opportunity available within these cosmic boundaries. New images appeared, showing vast gateways that seemed to open onto entirely different realities. Scenes of human explorers stepping through portals into universes where the laws of physics followed completely different patterns. Technologies that existed as pure thought. Worlds where consciousness itself was the fundamental building block of reality. We're moving on to explore other forms of existence entirely," Chen explained. "Other universes with different physical constants. Alternate realities where consciousness and matter interact in ways that don't exist here. Dimensions where time flows in patterns that allow for experiences we can't achieve in linear causality." The delegation sat in stunned silence as the full scope of humanity's departure became clear. They weren't just leaving Confederation space or even the galaxy. They were leaving reality itself. "But we're not entirely heartless," Chen continued, her expression softening slightly. "We remember what it was like to be confined by limitations, to have our growth restricted by others' cautious approaches. We don't want to see other species trapped by the same constraints that once held us back." The space around the delegation's ship suddenly filled with quantum data streams, terabytes of information flowing directly into their ship's computers. Technical specifications, theoretical frameworks, manufacturing processes, and experimental procedures beyond anything in Confederation databases. "This represents approximately 10,000 years of our research and development," Chen explained casually. "Energy manipulation techniques that will make your fusion reactors obsolete, material sciences that will allow you to build structures larger than star systems, medical technologies that can eliminate aging and disease, transportation systems that treat distance as an engineering variable rather than a fundamental constraint." Ambassador Krelthane watched in amazement as his ship's computers struggled to process the incoming data. The information represented technological advancement that would transform Confederation civilization beyond recognition. "Consider it a graduation present," Chen said, echoing the phrase from the museum display. "Our way of saying goodbye and wishing you well in your own development." The hologram paused again, and when Chen spoke next, her voice carried undertones of something that might have been hope. "Try not to make the same mistakes with the next species you encounter. When you meet young civilizations full of enthusiasm and unconventional ideas, remember that their different approach might not be a limitation to overcome. It might be exactly what they need to achieve things you never thought possible." The message was clearly drawing to a close, but Chen had one final observation to share. "In perhaps 1,000,000 years, your species might develop enough to follow the path we're taking. We hope you do. The multiverse is vast and full of wonders that no single species should explore alone. Until then, remember that the greatest limitations are often the ones we accept rather than the ones imposed by reality itself." The hologram began to fade, but Chen's final words carried clearly across. The quantum transmission. Thank you for teaching us that we didn't need